Ethan Ashford, a quiet yet determined photographer, lived in a modest third-floor apartment at the edge of Hale City, a place where neon signs clashed with soot-covered brick walls, and where lonely street lamps lit up in puddles of perpetual drizzle. He was not the kind of man who sought adventure. Yet, as he often reminded himself, life had a curious way of bringing the extraordinary to those least expecting it. On a damp autumn night, while the moon glowed with a ghostly pallor in the cloud-strewn sky, Ethan found himself hunched over his mahogany desk, retouching photos for a local magazine. He specialized in nocturnal images, shadows cast against old architecture, deserted bridges shimmering with lunar reflections, lonely alleyways haunted by the flicker of a single bulb. The city at night had always enthralled him, and each photograph was a testament to that fascination. His reverie was interrupted by an unusual sound, an unfamiliar, melodic giggle, so distant that at first he assumed it was some late-night television show from his neighbor's flat. But this sound, gentle and ethereal, echoed in a way that belonged nowhere near the stale corridors of his building. Perplexed, Ethan removed his headphones, letting them rest around his neck. He listened again, straining to hear past the steady hum of his computer fan and the faint traffic outside. There it was once more, a high, tinkling laugh, muffled yet strangely resonant, coming from somewhere deeper within his apartment. A chill swept through him, followed by a burst of curiosity. He lived alone, had no pets, and seldom entertained guests. Convinced that the noise was a trick of his mind or a distortion of the building's old pipes, he tried to return to his editing. Yet the intrigue refused to let him go. He pressed his ear to the door of his small, cramped bathroom. Within that space, behind the pale yellow shower curtain, the laughter fluttered again, like light dancing on water's surface. Hesitantly, he flipped the bathroom light switch. A gentle hum of fluorescent lighting filled the tiles with a weak, cold glow. He drew in a slow breath, trying to still his pulse, which now pounded heavily in his throat. Hesitation hung in the air for a moment. Then, drawing the curtain aside, Ethan nearly lost his grip on reality. Before him stood two breathtaking figures with cerulean blue skin, each curve of their limbs glowing faintly under the fluorescent light. They were tall, slender, their eyes gleaming like polished opals. The first, her hair white as starlight, gazed at him with an expression somewhere between mischief and wonder, while the second, with a cascade of shimmering gold hair, offered a gentle smile that seemed to break the static tension in the air. Both were drenched, water rivulets clinging to shoulders and chiseled waists, the shower still sputtering tepid droplets around them. A swirling silver device at their feet emanated a low hum, something that looked simultaneously futuristic and ancient, as though fashioned by a civilization that had long mastered both science and art. Ethan's breath caught in his throat, half in astonishment, half in alarm. He tried to form words, but they tangled on his tongue. It was the white-haired woman who spoke first, her tone lilting, as though she had only just discovered the shape of each syllable. "Greetings, Earthman," she said, her accent unplaceable, carrying a gentle reverberation that tickled Ethan's eardrums. "Forgive our intrusion. My name is Mira, and this is Sylis." Her companion, the golden-haired alien, tilted her head in a gesture of respect, trailing a graceful hand along the slick tiles. "This structure for cleansing," she murmured. "It is delightful. Where we come from, water is scarce." His mind reeled, searching for reason in this impossible tableau. Two otherworldly women, in his shower, speaking a strangely formal brand of English, marveling at the water that was so mundane to his daily life. Yet that same water now felt anything but ordinary. How? Ethan stammered, cheeks flushing at the sight. "What are you doing here?" Mira stepped forward, seemingly without any self-consciousness about her state of undress. "We are from Orvara," she explained, her voice like silver bells. "Our planet is dying. We used a phase shift technology to seek out a new place with abundant water and stable resources. We studied the coordinates for your planet, observed your kind, and took a direct approach to exploring." Sylis bent to retrieve a piece of their strange device. "We did not mean to startle you," she said softly, glancing up, her emerald green eyes shining with sincerity. "We only wished to experience true water, to feel it on our skin." We hoped no one would be harmed by this brief incursion. Ethan's mind warred between alarm and wonder. Common sense told him to call someone, to notify the authorities, yet a deeper, more primal sense of empathy blossomed in his chest. They did not appear threatening. Instead, they radiated awe, curiosity, and, strangely, a longing that tugged at his heartstrings. Cautiously, he offered them towels from the nearby rack. "You must be cold," Ethan managed to say. "Here, use these." Gratitude illuminated their faces in luminous smiles. Though his fingers trembled, Ethan stepped aside to give them space. The two alien women patted themselves dry with almost childlike fascination at the soft cotton, their giggles echoing in the tiled room. The strangeness of the situation struck him again, and he braced himself on the bathroom sink. "How did you learn our language?" he asked. It was a question he could articulate only after the initial shock began to wear off. Sylis pointed to a thin, glowing band around her neck. "Universal translator," she said gently. "It assimilates language patterns from electromagnetic waves, sound frequencies, the visual data from your broadcast signals. We have studied you for some time, and while we do not yet master the nuances, we can speak enough." Ethan nodded, feeling an odd mixture of relief and discomfort. Slowly, he directed them out of the cramped confines of his shower and into the living area, flicking off the water to prevent the apartment from flooding. They followed with wide-eyed wonder, gazing at the modest walls, the threadbare couch, the framed photographs of cityscapes that Ethan had taken over the years. Mira paused near one of his pictures of the old iron bridge at midnight, where moonlight danced on black waters. She traced a finger delicately over the frame, the corners of her lips curving in silent admiration. Sylis, meanwhile, studied a half-open photography book on Ethan's desk, marveling at the images of Earth's natural wonders, mountains, forests, waterfalls. "This planet, it is truly brimming with beauty," Sylis whispered, as though in reverence. So different from Orvara's scorched plains. Ethan found himself oddly proud of Earth at that moment, as though these visitors' appreciation cast his world in a gentler light. Yet beneath that pride lay 1,000 questions, each clamoring for attention, each overshadowed by the unlikeliest fact of all. Two visitors from another world were here, standing under his roof, dripping water onto his floor. "You said your planet is dying. Are you refugees or explorers?" he asked. Mira's gaze grew suddenly heavy, as though a shadow passed across her face. "Both," she replied. "Our entire species faces extinction. We must find a way to ensure our survival. Our leaders devised a plan to gather what we could from Earth to help restore Orvara, genetic samples, cultural knowledge, resources to revitalize our home." Ethan swallowed hard. A creeping realization began to dawn. "Genetic samples," he echoed, voice thick with curiosity and a twinge of apprehension. Sylis cast him a sympathetic look. "Our race has lost the ability to reproduce effectively. Generations of environmental collapse have compromised our biology. We came to learn whether Earth's living beings could offer a solution." The magnitude of their mission struck Ethan like a physical blow. He looked at them anew, these graceful, shining alien women, and felt the weight of responsibility settle over him. He cleared his throat, crossing his arms tightly over his chest, as though trying to shield himself from the strangeness unfolding around him. "I need time to process this," he said hesitantly. "I won't turn you in, if that's what you fear. But you can't just wander around out in the open. People might not react well." Sylis inclined her head in gratitude. "Thank you, Ethan. We are in your debt." Mira touched Ethan's shoulder gently, her eyes shimmering with a sincerity that stirred him. "We do not wish to intrude," she offered. "But we have nowhere to go. And the water, we long to feel more of it. Is there more water nearby?" He blinked, momentarily at a loss. "Well, there's an ocean not too far away, lakes, rivers. Earth is mostly covered in water, if you can believe it." At this, Mira and Sylis exchanged an excited glance, as though the mere mention of vast bodies of water brought them hope. In that moment, Ethan realized he could not turn them away. Something in the pleas of their voices, in the quiet desperation behind their smiles, told him their arrival might be more than an accident of fate. And so, with a trembling breath, he told them they could stay, at least for the night, promising to discuss what to do in the morning. Relief dawned on their faces as Ethan handed them clothes. Baggy t-shirts and sweatpants he used for painting or household chores, which they accepted with amused curiosity. When they emerged, draped in human attire that was far too large for their slender frames, Ethan had to hide a wry smile. He prepared them a makeshift bed in the living room, filling their curious minds with answers to basic questions about Earth. And as the night waned, with streetlights flickering outside and a hush settling over the narrow alleys, Ethan tried to rest. Yet sleep came in a torrent of half-formed dreams. He saw an alien sun setting over scorched landscapes, felt the gentle splash of cold water on anxious skin, and heard the faint echo of laughter drifting through a dimly lit corridor. Little did he know that this initial, intimate encounter would herald a grander journey, one that carried the fate of two worlds on its tide. For with the dawn would come revelations, challenges, and perhaps the blossoming of a hope that could transcend the chasms between planets, all bound within the gentle cadence of dripping water. Morning arrived in a wash of pale sunlight that struggled through the grime-streaked window panes. Ethan awoke to the sound of hushed voices, their soothing cadence filling the apartment like a quiet lullaby. For a moment, he forgot the events of the night before and nearly rose to start his day as usual. But then the memory struck: Mira, Sylis, Orvara, and the trickling shower. With a bolt of renewed astonishment, Ethan quickly got dressed and stumbled out into the living room. He found the alien women kneeling by the open window, gazing in awe at the city below. Even from 3 stories up, the view was unremarkable by earthly standards, just a sprawl of worn-out rooftops and a tangle of telephone lines. Yet to Mira and Sylis, it was evidently a marvel. Their eyes sparkled, their voices hushed with reverence. A small breeze, carried on the morning air, rustled their borrowed clothes. "Good morning," Ethan ventured, awkwardly clearing his throat. They turned in unison, their radiant smiles greeting him. Mira's voice held a musical lilt as she asked, "Is it always this bright at this hour? Our home sun is pale and feeble now." Ethan nodded, noticing the faint shimmer that still clung to their skin, like some subtle bioluminescence. "We have a strong sun, though its warmth is often filtered by pollution. It's not the clearest sky out there," he admitted, with a self-conscious laugh. Celie stood, brushing soft threads of golden hair from her face. "We would like to learn more, if you will allow it," she said. Uncertain how to entertain or hide 2 aliens in the midst of the city, Ethan scratched the back of his neck. "I guess I can show you around, but we have to be careful. You both look, well, you don't look entirely human." Mira tilted her head, arching a delicate brow. "We can change our coloration slightly, if given the right stimuli. Our genetics allow for mild morphological shifts. Perhaps we can pass for humans with an unusual complexion, so long as no one looks too closely." Ethan blinked. That's an incredible ability. Might be enough to keep folks from panicking at first glance. His mind reeled, conjuring images of strangers' reactions. Fear, curiosity, awe, 1,000 possibilities. Yet, he also knew he had to keep them away from those who would exploit or harm them. Government agencies, unscrupulous labs, or just the cruelty of curious onlookers. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily upon him. "There's a cafe a few blocks away," he said, "and a market nearby. But I'm guessing you might want to see real water first, not just the shower." At the mention of water, Sylis's eyes lit up in that same childlike wonder. "Yes. Oh, but we must be discreet." "We'll figure it out," Ethan assured them. "Let's get something to eat, and then maybe I can take you to the lakeside. It's about an hour's drive." A short while later, they ventured cautiously outside, the morning air crisp against their cheeks. Thankfully, the city streets were still relatively empty, early commuters passing by with distracted eyes, more focused on their phone screens than the trio that slipped through the winding walkways. Mira and Sylis wore hooded sweatshirts that covered most of their heads, while their faces bore only the faintest tinge of blue. The morphological shift, however subtle, seemed enough to keep suspicions at bay. Still, Ethan kept a protective stance, guiding them toward a less crowded route. He spoke in hushed tones, explaining everyday human customs: how to cross the street at lights, how to order at a cafe counter, the exchange of money for goods. Every mundane detail was a wonder to the alien women, who asked questions with a tireless curiosity that threatened to drain Ethan's own limited knowledge of Earth's complexities. When they arrived at a small cafe, the owner, an elderly woman with perpetually tired eyes, barely glanced up from her newspaper. This allowed Ethan to purchase coffee and pastries without arousing suspicion. Sylis sipped the steaming coffee, lips pursed in surprise at its bitterness, but soon declared it fascinating. Mira, in turn, explored the texture of a cinnamon roll with delicate fingers, as if uncertain whether to smell, taste, or dissect it. Ethan couldn't help but be amused. Here he was, sharing a quiet morning meal with two off-world visitors, their expressions luminous in the tinted light. But not all curiosities went unnoticed. A younger patron looked their way more than once, his eyebrows knitting. Sensing the scrutiny, Ethan guided Mira and Sylis back into the street before any real questions could take root. Relief washed over him once they merged back into the flow of pedestrians. Eventually, Ethan hailed a cab, and they embarked on the hour-long journey to the lake. The cityscape fell away, giving rise to open fields and winding roads. Tall grasses swayed in the breeze. The sky spread wide and brilliant, dotted by clouds that cast fleeting shadows on the rolling hills. Mira and Sylis pressed their faces to the windows, soaking in every detail. Their whispered comments and hushed exclamations stirred a new appreciation in Ethan, too. He realized how seldom he savored these landscapes himself, how often he took for granted the wealth of natural beauty Earth had to offer. At last, they arrived at Lake Everbrook, a vast expanse of shimmering water. The lake's surface rippled under the soft wind, reflecting the azure sky overhead. Fewer people visited this spot on weekdays, and that gave Ethan a chance to discreetly lead the two aliens down a narrow, secluded path. The air was fresh, tinged with the scent of pine, as slender trees clustered near the water's edge. Sylis inhaled sharply, as though trying to capture the entire aroma in her lungs. Mira closed her eyes, letting the breeze ruffle her white hair, a look of perfect serenity on her face. Together, they approached the water, kneeling at the edge. Their slender fingers reached into the lake, stirring gentle splashes. They closed their eyes again, expressions transfixed, as though the water itself held a magical current they could feel coursing through their bones. Ethan lingered behind, letting them absorb the wonder. His heart clenched with empathy, thinking of their dying world, a place bereft of such life-giving water. When Sylis turned to him, her gaze shone with tears. "Ethan, thank you," she whispered, voice trembling with emotion. This is precious beyond words." Mira cupped the water in her hands, letting it cascade back into the lake. "Such abundance," she said in awe. "To feel it, to see it. Our people would weep with joy." Ethan swallowed hard, feeling tears prick at his own eyes. He laid a comforting hand on Mira's shoulder. "You're welcome," he murmured. "I'm sorry your planet has lost this treasure." For a time, they simply sat there, letting the breeze cradle them in its quiet solace. Then Mira stood, turning to face Ethan. Her gaze was resolute, and in that moment, she reminded him of someone who had carried a great burden for a long time. "We must speak about the reason we came," she said softly. "About our species' plight. There are many paths forward, but the question remains, is there a place for us here, or must we find a way to rejuvenate Orvara and remain there?" Sylis took a measured breath, glancing over at Ethan as well. "Our leaders believe that human DNA might help stabilize our own. The plan was to send envoys, like us, to quietly gather what was needed. But it is not so simple, now that we have encountered you, that we understand Earth better." Ethan shivered slightly. Though he sensed no malice, a swirl of caution rose within him. "Gathering DNA, how exactly do you plan to do that?" Mira and Sylis exchanged a glance, their expressions a mixture of uncertainty and earnest resolve. "We were provided with medical instruments," Mira explained, "designed to collect and merge genetic material. The exact process requires willing cooperation from a donor." Sylis added, "We are physically compatible with humans, though not in every aspect. The success of such merges is not guaranteed. The moral and ethical implications alone are daunting." Ethan nodded slowly, trying to still the anxious flutter in his stomach. Their approach was polite, yet it brought up all manner of questions about consent, consequences, and entanglements between species. Before he could articulate these concerns, Mira's voice cut through the tension. "We will not force anything, Ethan. That is not our way," she said earnestly. "We know we are asking for much. And if you cannot help, perhaps there will be others. But we must tell you, time is short." In the background, the lake whispered against the shore. Clouds drifted lazily across the sky, shifting patches of sunlight over the water. Ethan stared at the two aliens, remembering how helpless and awed they had seemed in the shower, how they now stood with a quiet dignity that underscored their desperation. He knew better than to give an immediate answer. He had to weigh everything: the moral burden, the risk, the possibility that he might hold, in some small way, a key to saving an entire race. "All right," he said, voice trembling. "I don't know if I can be that donor, but I can at least help you figure out how to continue your mission without drawing the wrong kind of attention. Maybe we can do some research, find a safe path." Relief softened their features. Sylis even let a smile curve her lips, though sadness still lingered behind her eyes. "Thank you, Ethan." They walked along the lake's edge, each step accompanied by the gentle hush of water against land. Birds circled overhead, their cries drifting on the breeze. Mira and Sylis paused to watch a pair of mallard ducks glide across the surface, enthralled by the life before them. The sorrow of Orvara's plight cast a somber note, but for a time, they embraced the fragile beauty of Earth's bounty. Amid that peaceful stretch of water and sky, an unspoken bond formed. Ethan felt it in the gentle brush of Mira's hand as she passed him a small, silvery trinket. "A token of Orvara," she said, carved from the last shimmering stones of a once fertile gorge. He pressed it close, marveling at its intricate patterns of swirling lines, each representing a lost source of water back on their home planet. In that moment, Ethan silently vowed to do what he could, no matter how small or seemingly futile. Whether by pointing them toward resources or by exploring the possibility of forging a more profound bond, he knew he could not turn away from their plight. Responsibility and compassion intertwined in his heart, forging a connection that transcended the boundaries of space and species. But hidden beneath the surface of this shared empathy was the stirring of something deeper, an emotional resonance that threatened to bloom into a complex tapestry of attraction, hope, and longing for answers that neither Earth nor Orvara alone could provide. And as the sun climbed higher, casting shimmering reflections across the water's surface, the three of them walked side by side, anchored by a fragile trust that would soon be tested in ways none of them yet understood. The journey back to the city felt different, a charged undercurrent of possibility threading through the small talk. Ethan's mind bristled with thoughts about the next steps: how to ensure Mira and Sylis remained safe, how to find a discreet way for them to gather the genetic material they needed, and how to keep his own life from spiraling out of control in the process. The cab driver paid them little heed, focusing on the winding roads. Mira and Sylis gazed out the windows, their faces bathed in the golden afternoon light. Despite all the tensions, a gentle warmth settled among them, a sense of shared purpose, of friendship in the making. Back at Ethan's apartment, they found a calm familiarity. The building's dim corridors offered a strange sort of refuge, the faint hum of fluorescent lights echoing their first encounter in the bathroom. Ethan locked the door behind them, setting the chain. A loaded silence fell over the room, punctuated only by the hum of the refrigerator and the buzz of the overhead lamp. "There's something I need to do," Ethan began, motioning toward his computer. "I have some friends, scientists, open-minded thinkers, who might be able to help quietly. Maybe they can offer insights without us having to divulge too much. They know me well enough not to ask overly suspicious questions at first." Mira and Sylis exchanged a look of cautious hope. "We trust you," Sylis said softly, her posture relaxing. Ethan nodded, settling into his swivel chair. With a few keystrokes, he opened an email draft to Dr. Felicia DaCosta, a geneticist friend who occasionally consulted for the local university. He and Felicia shared a long-standing respect. She admired his photography of nocturnal cityscapes, while he admired her brilliant mind and unwavering kindness. The email he composed was deliberately vague, an invitation to coffee, to discuss a theoretical scenario about cross-species genetics. He mentioned a unique research angle that demanded confidentiality. As his fingers hovered over the send button, anxiety gnawed at him. Revealing even a sliver of information posed a risk. Yet he felt cornered by the necessity of informed guidance. Summoning courage, he pressed send and released a shaky breath. Turning back to Mira and Sylis, Ethan found them studying the shelves of books and photography equipment. Sylis carefully lifted a vintage camera, admiring its mechanical beauty. Mira's fingers trailed across book spines, reading their titles in a near whisper. "Your world is filled with so much art and science," Mira murmured. "It is humbling to realize how little we truly understood before coming." Ethan closed his laptop, rising to join them. "Our world also struggles with wars, greed, and countless flaws. But, yes, there's beauty here too." Sylis set the camera down, turning to Ethan with a solemn expression. "As for the DNA merging, do you think your friend might help us find a safe method? Our technology is advanced, but we lack certain knowledge about your species' compatibility. We worry that a direct approach might harm both donor and recipient if done incorrectly." He swallowed, meeting Sylis's gaze. "Felicia is the best shot I've got, but we have to be discreet. She'll need an explanation, or at least some evidence that you're real." Mira nodded, her white hair shimmering. "We understand. We are prepared to reveal ourselves, if necessary. But only if you trust her, and only if she is willing to keep our existence secret." The weight of it loomed over them all. Repercussions could be huge: global chaos, the possibility of secret government involvement, the uncertain reaction of the public. Ethan reached out, laying a hand gently on Mira's shoulder in reassurance. "I trust her," he said firmly. "We'll do this step by step." The conversation lulled, and the late afternoon light dimmed. The tension in the apartment coiled like a tightly wound spring. Sensing they needed relief, Ethan cleared his throat. "Look, maybe we should eat something, relax for a bit. I'll cook dinner. It won't be fancy, but I can whip up something decent." Mira and Sylis exchanged smiles, welcoming the normalcy of a shared meal. So Ethan set about rummaging for ingredients: pasta, tomato sauce, some fresh herbs. The sounds of clinking pans and running water filled the small kitchen. Meanwhile, the two aliens observed with keen interest, occasionally asking about human cooking techniques, measuring utensils, or the small flame beneath the stove burner. When dinner was ready, they gathered around his tiny dining table, steam rising from their plates. At first, conversation was subdued, overshadowed by the day's revelations. But gradually, the warmth of the food and the flickering overhead light lent a sense of closeness. Sylis complimented the tangy taste of the tomato sauce, while Mira expressed fascination with how heat transformed raw ingredients into something flavorful and nourishing. As they ate, the topic inevitably circled back to Orvara. Mira recounted memories of the once lush valleys, how centuries of environmental neglect and cosmic phenomena had led to the draining of the planet's water sources. Sylis spoke of advanced Orvarian technology, the attempt to terraform distant moons, and the ultimate realization that Orvara's people needed genetic solutions to survive. Through it all, their voices trembled with the ache of loss and the desperation to save those who remained. Moved by their candor, Ethan shared fragments of his own life. How he'd lost his parents young, how photography became his solace, a way to freeze time and find beauty in fleeting moments. He confessed his occasional loneliness, the nights spent wandering the city, capturing scenes others overlooked. A bond formed, a fragile weaving of shared hopes and vulnerabilities. By the time the plates were cleared, the tension had shifted into something gentler, a recognition that they were three souls tied by fate, forging a path none had foreseen. Night descended, wrapping the city in a hush. Mira and Sylis readied their makeshift beds on the living room floor. Ethan hovered, uncertain whether he should give them privacy or stay close in case they needed anything. In the end, he settled on the couch, half lulled by the murmured conversation between the two alien women as they drifted toward sleep. But rest was slow to come. Ethan stared at the ceiling, listening to distant sirens and car horns. Fragments of doubt gnawed at him. What if Felicia refused to help, or grew alarmed by the truth? What if some authority discovered Mira and Sylis, leading to conflict or capture? At some point, exhaustion overtook him, and he slipped into dreams tinged with silver and blue. In those dreams, he saw Orvara bathed in sorrowful twilight, the ground cracked and desolate, as though a thirsting creature had drained every last drop. Then he envisioned Earth's water swirling in cosmic patterns, bridging the gap between worlds. The swirl took shape as two slender hands, reaching to clasp his own, each a different hue of shimmering blue. When morning came, Ethan woke to find Mira and Sylis already stirring, their arms draped in warm blankets, eyes reflecting the dim light creeping through the windows. An unspoken determination seemed to solidify among them. They were stepping forward into a future steeped in uncertainty, guided by the flicker of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, they could find a solution to save Orvara without dooming themselves in the process. And so the day began, each breath laced with promise and dread. Over breakfast, simple toast, and coffee, Ethan checked his inbox. A new email from Felicia blinked at him, crisp and concise. Ethan, your request intrigues me. I'm free this evening at my lab. Stop by after 6. Let's talk. Felicia. He read it twice, heart hammering. Sylis and Mira watched him closely, their expressions brightening when he told them the news. Though it was only a small step, the path was now set. If Felicia proved receptive, the door to saving Orvara might just open a crack. The hours leading to the evening crawled by in a slow drumbeat of anticipation. Ethan busied himself tidying the apartment, occasionally explaining random Earth customs to Mira and Sylis. They exchanged small smiles, lingering glances, as though forging silent encouragement for the task ahead. Even the air between them felt laden with both tenderness and the tingling friction of an unknown tomorrow. At last, the sun dipped below the horizon. Ethan donned a jacket, then offered the two aliens a pair of hats and tinted sunglasses to mask their unusual features. They set out by foot at first, blending into the city's twilight bustle, before catching a public bus that trundled toward the university district. Underneath the fluorescent lights of the bus, Ethan could see his own reflection in the window, tense brow, pursed lips. Mira and Sylis sat close, quietly scanning their surroundings with curious eyes. Students filled the seats, toting backpacks, engaged in soft banter about assignments and weekend plans. None gave a second look at the hooded strangers beside them. Soon, they reached the university's research building, a hulking structure of glass and steel that gleamed under lampposts. Felicia's genetics lab was tucked away on the 3rd floor, behind secure doors. The corridors were quiet at this hour, a perfect cloak for their clandestine meeting. As they approached the lab's entrance, Ethan's heart pounded a rapid rhythm. If Felicia turned them away or panicked, everything could unravel. He rapped lightly on the frosted glass door. Moments later, Felicia DaCosta herself appeared, a petite woman in a lab coat, with warm brown eyes that reflected curiosity and intelligence. She regarded Ethan with a quirked brow. You look nervous. That must mean you've got something truly mind-blowing up your sleeve. Ethan offered a shaky laugh. You might say that. May we come in? Felicia stepped back, allowing them entry. She locked the door after them. The lab's overhead lights cast a sterile glare on metal counters, microscopes, and carefully labeled equipment. The hum of an air filtration system filled the silence. So, Felicia said, turning to face Ethan, what's this about cross-species genetics? Are you rewriting your photography subjects, or did you stumble on a stray Martian's blood sample? Ethan swallowed, glancing at Mira and Sylis. Their faces were partially obscured by hats and glasses, but the tension radiating from them was palpable. Felicia, you're about to see something extraordinary, he said. I just ask that you keep an open mind and promise me your secrecy, at least until we figure out next steps. Felicia studied him for a long moment, her gaze flickering between the 3 visitors. Then she gave a small, decisive nod. You've never led me astray before, Ethan. Show me. At that prompt, Mira removed her hat. Blue skin and white hair shone under the lab light. Sylis followed suit, her golden hair cascading around her. Both stared at Felicia with a quiet dignity, as though bracing for alarm or rejection. Felicia's eyes widened. Her breath caught in her throat. She took an involuntary step back, heart hammering audibly in the hush. For several seconds, no one moved, no one spoke. Then Felicia slowly circled around them, her gaze intense, as though her scientific mind tried frantically to categorize what her eyes were telling her. Ethan broke the silence. Felicia, meet Mira and Sylis. They come from a planet called Orvara, a world that's dying. And they think Earth's genetic material might be the key to saving their species. He half expected Felicia to faint, scream, or call security. Instead, she did something that underscored precisely why Ethan had chosen her. She drew a trembling breath, then extended her hand. First to Mira, then to Sylis. It's an honor. My name is Dr. Felicia DaCosta. I promise I won't do anything to harm you. The two aliens exchanged relieved smiles. Mira took Felicia's offered hand, gripping it gently. We thank you for this chance, she said, her voice soft but steady. Felicia exhaled a shaky laugh, pressing her palm against her forehead. In all my dreams of scientific breakthroughs, I never imagined actual extraterrestrial visitors. My God, do you both have the same physiology, or are you different subgroups? Sylis managed a small grin. We share core traits, though each Orvarian can exhibit unique nuances in their physiology. We can explain more if you are willing to help. Felicia motioned for them to sit around a nearby table. Tell me everything, she said. Start from the beginning. Then, if I can help, I will. And so they spent the next hour unveiling their story, from Orvara's environmental cataclysm to their mission on Earth, to the desperate quest for a genetic solution. Felicia asked countless questions, occasionally taking notes or referencing thick textbooks on advanced genetics. At intervals, her awe flared visibly, as though she had to pinch herself to believe it was real. Finally, she sat back, tapping her pen against the table's stainless steel surface. I can run some preliminary tests, blood samples, see how your DNA is structured in comparison to ours, she said. We need to ensure any merging or splicing doesn't cause lethal rejection. But I'll need more sophisticated equipment, and we have to do it off the record. Mira and Sylis exchanged a hopeful glance. Thank you, Mira said, her voice quivering with gratitude. Felicia eyed Ethan. This is beyond anything I've dealt with, but I trust you. If your friends here need a safe space to do discrete analyses, I'll find a way. As for actual cross-species fertilization or merging, that's a leap into uncharted territory. But if we move carefully, we might find a path. Relief washed over Ethan. He reached out to squeeze Felicia's hand. I can't thank you enough. She smiled, though her eyes were a swirl of astonishment and determination. Just wait until the shock wears off, she said, half joking. Then her voice grew serious. We'll have to be extremely careful. If word gets out, I can't even imagine the consequences. Governments, corporations, everyone would want a piece of this discovery. It would be chaos. Mira and Sylis nodded gravely, understanding the delicate tightrope they were about to walk. But beneath the shared apprehension lay a spark of hope. With Felicia's scientific prowess, perhaps there was a genuine chance to find a solution. The possibility glimmered, like a candle flame in a darkened room. By the time they emerged from the lab, it was well past midnight. Felicia walked them to the exit, arms wrapped around herself as if to ward off the chill of the night. She promised to reach out soon with next steps, arranging a discreet sample collection and preliminary gene mapping. Outside, the air smelled of damp concrete and distant rain. The campus was quiet, lit by a handful of flickering lamps that cast elongated shadows across walkways. They hurried across the empty courtyard, breath condensing in the cold. As they left the university behind, a new chapter beckoned. For the first time, Ethan allowed himself to believe that they were on the path towards something monumental, that perhaps Mira and Sylis would not have to watch their world fade without hope. They walked in silence, each consumed by private thoughts, hearts beating in tentative unison. Unbeknownst to them, a figure lingered behind a distant pillar, half hidden in shadows. A quick flash of a phone camera, the faint click of a shutter. Then, the silhouette melted away into the darkness, leaving only a hush in its wake. A hush that promised secrets would not remain secret for long. Tension grew over the following days. Ethan balanced a precarious act, juggling his photography work with the discreet visits to Felicia's lab, all while sheltering Mira and Sylis in his cramped apartment. He caught glimpses of them adapting to life on Earth, Sylis transfixed by morning television shows, Mira determinedly practicing the use of utensils as she experimented with different human foods. Their naive wonder often tugged at his heartstrings, reminding him of the stakes involved. Meanwhile, Felicia worked tirelessly, her brilliant mind diving headfirst into the puzzle of Orvarian and human genetics. She ran advanced tests at odd hours when the lab was deserted, coordinating with Ethan by burner phone and exchanging cryptic messages to avoid detection. Through it all, her fascination only grew, as did her empathy for Mira and Sylis' plight. One overcast afternoon, Ethan and the two aliens slipped into the lab once again. Felicia greeted them with a guarded but friendly smile. "I've run the preliminary analyses," she announced, ushering them inside. The overhead fluorescents hummed. Screens glowed with molecular models, color-coded charts, and gene sequencing readouts. Sylis' eyes flickered with anticipation. And Felicia exhaled, turning to the monitors. "Your DNA is astonishingly compatible with human genetic structures, at least on the fundamental level, far more than I'd have expected from a species of extraterrestrial origin. It's almost as though there's some universal blueprint at play. However, there are anomalies. I see signs of advanced bioengineering in your code, likely attempts by your people to stave off extinction. This complicates the process." She brought up a complex 3D model on the screen. "If you tried to merge your genes with a random human, the hybrid cells might reject each other unless certain sequences align perfectly. That means we need a very precise match." Myra's brows knit with worry. "So it's not a simple matter of collecting random samples." "Correct," Felicia replied. "You need someone with just the right genetic markers. It's a 1 in a million chance, or perhaps even more rare. A partial infusion might help, but for a stable future generation, you need an ongoing process of supplementation or a single, highly compatible match." Sylis let out a slow breath, shoulders sagging. "This complicates our mission. We do not have the time nor the population size for endless trials." Ethan looked between them, an unexpected pang in his chest. "Is there a way to narrow down potential candidates?" Felicia clicked through more data. "Potentially. We need a broad genetic database to scan for those markers. That implies tapping into medical records, corporate labs, places that keep large amounts of genetic data. And that's extremely risky. If we raise any suspicions, we might draw the attention of very powerful entities." Silence cloaked the lab, each occupant consumed by the grave reality. Finally, Mira placed a hand lightly on Ethan's arm. "We cannot endanger your entire planet, or your own well-being, in a frantic search," she said, her voice trembling with sincerity. "That is not our intention." Felicia tapped a pen against the desk, her expression introspective. "I might be able to do some targeted searches within my own limited resources, anonymous data samples from certain research studies. It's not a big pool, but it could give us a start. Beyond that, we might consider specialized genetic testing. If we could find volunteers, frame it as a normal research project. But this is all hypothetical for now." Ethan gave a small nod, though his mind churned with questions. How far was he willing to go? How many risks was he ready to take? And there was also the question of his own DNA. If his markers matched, would he consider volunteering? He caught sight of Mira and Sylis out of the corner of his eye, noting the way they held themselves with quiet dignity, even under the weight of desperation. Sylis' gaze flickered toward him, and in that moment, he saw an unspoken question cross her features. It ignited a swirl of emotions in him he struggled to define. "I can provide a sample," he murmured, breaking the silence. "I don't know if I'll be compatible, but at least it's one data point." Felicia offered a grateful smile. "That might help. We can run a thorough check. No promises, though." With that, Felicia drew a small vial of blood from Ethan, labeling it meticulously. Next, she turned to Mira and Sylis, taking additional samples for more refined analysis. There was something intimate about the process, an intermingling of trust and vulnerability that neither side took lightly. When they were done, Felicia stashed the vials in a hidden fridge compartment, concealing them behind decoy samples. "I'll begin analyzing these immediately," she said. "For now, it's probably best if you all lay low. If I find anything that stands out, I'll contact you." They parted ways under the cover of dusk. Ethan and the aliens left through a side exit, shadows stretching under flickering lampposts. Despite the tension, a faint sense of optimism buoyed them. They had a foothold in the uncertain climb towards saving Orvara. Yet, as fate would have it, caution alone was not enough to keep them hidden. A few nights later, When Ethan was guiding Mira and Sylis through a deserted back alley to avoid prying eyes, a trio of figures appeared from around the corner. 2 men and a woman, each wearing dark clothing and holding cameras with telephoto lenses. The click-click-click of shutters broke the stillness. Ethan froze, instincts roaring to flee or fight. He quickly pulled Mira and Sylis behind him, shielding them with his body. The flash of a camera lit up the gloom, capturing the moment in stark detail. Desperation thundered in Ethan's pulse. "Back off," he shouted, voice echoing in the alley. "Who are you?" The woman stepped forward, her posture calm but predatory, camera still raised. "We could ask you the same thing," she said in a low tone. "You've got some real interesting friends." Sylis gripped Ethan's sleeve, eyes full of alarm. Mira tensed, scanning for any route of escape. Ethan clenched his fists. "They're just performance artists. Their skin is dyed, that's all." The photographer scoffed. "Right. We've been shadowing you for days. We saw you enter that genetics lab after hours. Whatever these women are, they're not from around here." Ethan's heart dropped. "What do you want?" A slow smile curled the woman's lips. "We work for a news outfit. We smell a story, alien visitors on Earth. The biggest scoop in centuries. But we're open to deals. If you and your friends cooperate, maybe we can all profit. Otherwise, we go public with our photos." Mira stepped forward, anger and fear mingling on her face. "You would betray us for money?" One of the men chuckled darkly. "You're the story of a lifetime, sweetheart. People are going to pay a fortune for proof of your existence. We're just giving you a chance to broker it on your terms." Revulsion churned in Ethan's gut. "They're living beings, not a sideshow," he spat. "If you go public, you'll unleash havoc. Governments, labs, who knows who else, they'll be hunted." "Not our problem," the woman retorted. "But like I said, we're prepared to negotiate. That's our offer. You've got 48 hours to decide, or we publish." Their cameras clicked a few more times, capturing the shocked expressions on Ethan, Mira, and Sylis' faces. Then they turned and strode away, footprints echoing in the damp alley, leaving behind only the stench of opportunism. For a moment, no one moved. Then Sylis' breath trembled, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ethan, what will we do?" He swallowed, mind reeling with possibilities. They could try to run, to disappear. But where would they go? If these paparazzi had already followed them, there might be more. And if those photos went public? Mira's shoulders squared. "We cannot allow them to compromise our mission or harm you. Perhaps we could reason with them, offer them compensation, or erase their evidence." Ethan closed his eyes, a wave of guilt surging. "I don't have the funds to bribe them. And even if we did, there's no guarantee they won't leak something anyway." His gaze swept the silent alleyway, the flicker of a single street lamp casting elongated shadows across garbage bins and walls. A chilling realization settled on him. If word got out, it would not just put Mira and Sylis at risk, but also Felicia, who had staked her career and her freedom on helping them. "Let's get back to my apartment," Ethan said, voice low, "and figure out a plan. We may need to leave the city, fast." They hurried away from the alley, hearts pounding in unison. Once inside, the lock clicked shut behind them, offering a feeble sense of security. Ethan collapsed onto a chair, face pale under the overhead light. Mira and Sylis stood close, silent as they tried to process the looming threat. "We can't just vanish," Sylis said after a tense moment. "We need Felicia's help to continue the research. Our people, they depend on it." Mira nodded, placing a hand over her heart. "Yet, if the media reveals our presence, we might lose any chance of peaceful collaboration. We could be labeled invaders or test subjects." Ethan swallowed hard. His mind raced with half-formed ideas. "Could we replicate your phase shift technology? Escape to somewhere else on Earth? Or even back to Orvara, at least temporarily?" Sylis shook her head, frustration crossing her features. "Our device is damaged from the initial landing, which is why we emerged in your shower. It requires more power than we can easily obtain on Earth without drawing attention." Another dead end. The weight of hopelessness bore down, pressing them into silence. Eventually, Ethan's fists tightened. "I might have another option. If these paparazzi are after money, we can try to divert them or ruin their credibility. I know some people in the underground of the city, hackers, folks who can sabotage digital files. If we can get them to destroy or corrupt the images before publication, that might buy us time. Mira's eyes flickered with a cautious hope. Is that feasible? Ethan pinched the bridge of his nose. Maybe. If the paparazzi stored their images on any network device, a skilled hacker could erase them or manipulate them. But that won't solve the underlying problem if they also have physical copies or backups. Sylis let out a trembling breath. This is so complicated. We came seeking life for our people, yet we may have brought danger upon you and your world. He gently cupped Sylis' shoulders, meeting her gaze. Don't blame yourself. You did what you had to do for your people. I just have to think this through. Hours passed in restless discussion. They combed through every angle: bribery, hacking, relocating, even confronting the paparazzi face-to-face to beg for mercy. Each plan seemed riddled with risk. In the end, exhaustion and indecision weighed heavily, forcing them to catch a few hours of fitful sleep, haunted by flickering images of cameras and flashing lights. Morning arrived, gray and oppressive. The wind hissed outside the apartment windows, as though in warning of coming turmoil. Ethan rose with a stiff back and troubled mind. His phone buzzed on the countertop, an unknown number. He answered, tension knotting his stomach. Mr. Ashford, came a cool voice. It's your favorite paparazzi calling to check in. Thought I'd remind you. 36 hours left to decide if you want a piece of the pie or if we go public. Tick-tock. The line went dead. Ethan trembled with anger. Mira and Sylis, having overheard, exchanged grim looks. The walls of the apartment felt suddenly too close, confining them in a prison of dread. They had less than 2 days to salvage their secrecy, to preserve the fragile alliance with Felicia, and to keep hope alive for Orvara's dying population. Little did they know, the next 36 hours would unleash a series of events that tested their loyalty, their ingenuity, and the very bonds that had formed between them. In that crucible of adversity, alliances would be forged, sacrifices made, and desires awakened, leading them toward a precipice where the fate of 2 worlds hung in the balance. Daylight waned into a restless afternoon. Roused by necessity, Ethan reached out to his friend Arlo, an elusive hacker whose loyalty was fickle, but whose skills were rumored to be unparalleled. Through an exchange of coded messages, Ethan managed to arrange a covert meeting in a dilapidated warehouse by the river, far from prying eyes. That evening, with worry etched into every line of his face, Ethan led Mira and Sylis through the deserted streets until they reached a rusted gate. The wide river nearby reflected neon glimmers from distant factories. A sense of silent foreboding weighed on them as they stepped inside the cavernous warehouse. Arlo emerged from the shadows, a lean figure with a worn beanie, pulled low and eyes that gleamed with predatory intelligence. Ethan, he greeted flatly, a trace of recognition softening his otherwise cold demeanor. Long time. You've got some nerve, calling me out of the blue. Ethan wasted no time. I need your help, he said. Hackers. Data sabotage. The works. Arlo snorted, crossing his arms. Who's trying to ruin your day? These paparazzi. They've taken photos that can't go public. It's a matter of life or death. Arlo's gaze flicked to Mira and Sylis. Even in the dim light, he could see the faint hue of their skin, the otherworldly glow in their eyes. I see, he murmured, intrigue dancing in his expression. And what's in it for me? Ethan's teeth clenched, but he answered calmly. Money, connections, I'll owe you a big favor. I can gather funds from my savings, sell my photography equipment if needed. Arlo, please, this is crucial. The hacker studied them for a tense moment before nodding once. Fine. Give me everything you know about these paparazzi, their names, the agencies they use, possible servers. I'll do what I can. Relief fluttered in Ethan's chest. He relayed every detail. Mira and Sylis stood by in anxious silence, aware that their futures hinged on this tenuous gamble. Arlo listened, occasionally tapping notes into a battered tablet. When Ethan finished, Arlo slipped it into his coat pocket. I'll be in touch. Keep your phone handy. Without waiting for pleasantries, Arlo melted back into the darkness, footsteps echoing against concrete. Ethan let out a shaky breath, turning to face Mira and Sylis. It's the best shot we have, he said softly. If he can erase the files, or at least get them off the paparazzi's devices, they may have nothing to publish. Sylis nodded, forcing a smile. We trust you, Ethan. They returned to the apartment, each minute feeling like an hour. The next day crawled forward in tense silence. Finally, at midday, Ethan's phone buzzed. A single text from Arlo. Meet me at the old warehouse in 1 hour. I have news. Ethan's heart hammered as he gathered Mira and Sylis. Stealthily, they made their way back to the rendezvous. Arlo was already waiting, leaning against a rusted pillar, an unreadable expression on his face. Got good news and bad news, he said when Ethan approached. Ethan's stomach dropped. Tell me. Arlo lifted a hand, ticking off his points. The good news, I got into their primary storage. Everything's wiped. The pictures, the videos, the backups. They use a cloud server that's now corrupted beyond repair. They'll never recover it. Ethan's relief was immediate and overwhelming. He nearly slumped to the floor. Arlo, thank you. You're a lifesaver. Arlo held up a cautionary finger. The bad news, they suspected a hack. They're furious. They believe you're involved, obviously, and they've decided to go after you in person. They want more pictures or a face-to-face meeting to blackmail you. They'll probably try to tail you again. If they get fresh photos, they'll store them offline. So, you're not fully out of the woods. Mira and Sylis exchanged anxious glances. Ethan let out a harsh breath. Then we can't stay here. We need to leave the city. And go where? Arlo asked, arching a brow. They'll keep hunting you, unless you can buy them off or... I don't know. That's not my department. Sylis's voice trembled as she spoke. Our mission requires us to stay near Felicia for the genetic work. We can't abandon that. Arlo shrugged. Then you need to step up security. Disguises, code names, maybe a location they can't easily track. This city is big, but not that big. Up to you. An idea sparked in Ethan's mind. He turned to Mira and Sylis. What if we move operations to Felicia's private home? She has a small cabin outside the city. She mentioned it once, a secluded place with a basement lab. If she's willing, we could go there until the experiments are done. It was a desperate plan, but the only one that made sense. If they stayed in the city, they were sitting ducks. Sylis and Mira nodded in agreement. Arlo gave a vague, two-finger salute and slipped away, leaving them with that precarious lifeline. They wasted no time. After a frantic call, Felicia agreed to meet them at her cabin that very night. Under cover of darkness, they piled into Felicia's old pickup truck, the only vehicle she trusted not to be bugged. They drove for hours, winding through rural roads until streetlights gave way to moonlit fields. The paparazzi, if following, would find the trail difficult in the labyrinth of backroads. At last, they arrived at a small wooden cabin nestled beside a dense forest. The silhouette of tall pines framed the structure, and a gravel path led to a secluded clearing. In the crisp night air, the cabin's porch light glowed like a lone star, guiding them in. Felicia hopped out of the driver's seat and unlocked the door. Inside, the cabin was modest but cozy, a living room with old furniture, a stone fireplace, and the faint scent of cedar. She led them downstairs to a hidden basement lab, stocked with a few medical devices, a computer, and numerous reference materials. I used to come here for private research, she explained, flicking on the fluorescent overhead lights. Figured it might be safer than the university these days. So let's keep going. I have your blood samples, plus the data from Mira and Sylis. I've been running advanced sequencing with every spare moment I had. Nerves coiled like a spring in Ethan's chest. He exchanged a glance with the two aliens, each of whom radiated a mix of trepidation and hope. Felicia sat at her computer terminal, typed in a series of commands, and brought up luminous 3D gene models, rotating them with deft keystrokes. I have partial results, she said. Ethan, I compared your genetic markers to Mira and Sylis's. It turns out you have a high compatibility index. Ethan froze, breath catching. What does that mean? Felicia gazed at the screen, awe dancing in her eyes. It means you're an exceptionally close match for their required sequences, more so than any other theoretical sample I've tested. In other words, if cross-species fertilization or genetic merging is going to work, you stand the best chance of making it successful. A taut silence followed. Mira and Sylis locked eyes with Ethan, emotion flickering across their features. There was wonder there, but also the weight of a profound question. Would he be willing to help? Ethan swallowed hard. So, if I volunteer my DNA, either for direct merging or some surrogate process, it could help save Orvara? Felicia nodded. Potentially, but it's experimental. I'd need to refine the procedure with Orvarian technology, and we'd have to do it here, quietly. Even then, the outcome is uncertain. Mira stepped forward, voice trembling with emotion. Ethan, we cannot ask you to shoulder such a burden lightly. But you should know, this might be our species' last chance. Sylis placed a trembling hand on Ethan's arm. We would never force you. But, if you agree, you will have our eternal gratitude, and that of our people. A turbulent storm of thoughts raged in Ethan's mind. Fear and uncertainty collided with compassion and a sense of destiny. He recalled every moment of wonder and vulnerability shared with these two beings, the sparkle in their eyes when first touching Earth's water, their quiet determination to save Orvara, and the gentleness that had grown between them over the days spent in his modest apartment. He felt an undeniable pull, a sense that this moment was not just about altruism. It was about forging a bridge between worlds, fueled by trust and a blossoming affection he could barely name. Felicia spoke softly. We can do artificial methods, harvest your genetic material in a lab-based procedure. Or, if Orvarian tradition prefers it, there might be a more personal route. But that's up to you and them. Heat rose to Ethan's cheeks at the implication. Mira and Sylis both looked away, a flush coloring their cheeks as well, even under the faint hue of their skin. Yet, there was no mistaking the tenderness in their gazes, nor the hint of possibility that shimmered in the charged air. I'll do it, Ethan said, voice cracking slightly. If there's a chance, however small, to save your people, then yes. Let's figure out how. Relief and gratitude lit up Mira's face. Sylis exhaled shakily, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. Felicia's shoulders relaxed. Okay, she said, businesslike once more. I'll begin prepping everything. Mira and Sylis can walk me through their technology. We'll try to handle this primarily via lab-based procedures for safety, though if a deeper bond is required, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Over the next few days, the cabin became a crucible of furtive science and emotional intensity. Felicia and the alien women worked long hours, calibrating the phase-shift medical device that Mira and Sylis had salvaged. Ethan took daily blood draws, provided tissue samples, and endured scanning sessions that mapped every nuance of his genetic code. Meanwhile, outside, the forest stood in silent guard. The paparazzi threat lingered, but for now, they had no clue where Ethan or the aliens had gone. Each morning, Felicia scanned obscure news channels and online forums, searching for any sign of leaked stories. Nothing yet. Time, however, was short. The Orvarian Council, waiting across the void, needed results soon. Finally, after countless tests and calibrations, Felicia looked up from a microscope with shining eyes. I think we're ready. The synthetic embryo is stable. If everything goes right, we can imprint Orvarian DNA with Ethan's sequences, creating a new lineage that might revitalize your species' reproductive capabilities. Mira and Sylis hovered over her shoulder, hearts pounding. Then we can carry it back to Orvara. Use it as the basis for further regeneration, Mira murmured, threading her tone. Felicia nodded, wiping sweat from her brow. We just need the final infusion. Ethan took a steadying breath. He had already given more than he ever thought possible. But he saw the resolute hope in Mira and Sylis' eyes, the quiet sincerity in Felicia's. With trembling hands, he provided the last sample. One more blood draw, plus a specialized infusion of biological materials that Felicia had painstakingly prepared. A hush filled the basement lab as they initiated the device. Soft lights glowed, scanning the newly formed embryo. For several tense minutes, Felicia monitored the readouts, her brow furrowed. Then she let out a joyous laugh. It's working, she exclaimed, tears gathering in her eyes. The cells are fusing properly. No sign of rejection. Mira gasped, grabbing Sylis' hands. Both women stared at the digital display, the swirling colors indicating healthy cellular mitosis. The embryo was microscopic, but within it lay the precious code that could save an entire civilization. Ethan felt tears prick at his own eyes. Exhaustion and relief crashed over him in equal measure. So we did it. Felicia nodded, turning to him with a radiant smile. We did it, Ethan. In that moment of collective triumph, Mira and Sylis drew Ethan into a trembling embrace. He felt the warmth of their gratitude, the unspoken promise that whatever happened next, their bond would not be forgotten. A wave of emotion surged between them, hope, relief, and perhaps the tender, fragile beginnings of love. The days that followed were a whirlwind of last-minute arrangements. Mira and Sylis used the newly repaired phase shift technology, amplified by the cabin's generator and Felicia's jury-rigged equipment, to open a gateway. They would return to Orvara, carrying the embryo and the knowledge Felicia had painstakingly documented. On their final evening, they gathered outside under a tapestry of stars. The moon cast silver light across the cabin and the forest, a quiet farewell to the time they had spent together. Felicia left them to share a moment of privacy. Mira gazed at Ethan, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "We cannot express how much this means to us," she said softly. "You have given us hope when we had none." Sylis reached for his hand, fingers interlacing. "Your DNA, your kindness, it will echo through Orvara for generations to come. We promise, you will not be forgotten." Emotion choked Ethan's voice. I wish I could see your world. Maybe someday if things improve." Mira and Sylis exchanged a tender smile. "When Orvara is reborn," Sylis promised, "we would be honored to show you the new rivers and lakes, all springing from the hope you've given us." They embraced, the three of them bathed in moonlight. The closeness that had formed, strange and otherworldly though it was, felt like the most natural thing in the universe. Then, as dawn approached, the phase shift device hummed to life. Felicia stood to one side, observing in awe as ethereal lights shimmered, warping the air in a circular pattern. Mira and Sylis each took one of Ethan's hands in a final, lingering farewell. "We will return," Mira vowed, her voice thick with tears. "In time, once our people are safe." Sylis's lips brushed a gentle kiss across Ethan's cheek. "Thank you, Ethan, for everything." And with that, they stepped into the glowing portal. Their figures blurred, as though submerged in liquid starlight. Then the light contracted, vanishing in a final flash. The basement fell silent, empty, save for the faint scent of ozone and the memory of a bond forged across worlds. Felicia approached Ethan, laying a comforting hand on his shoulder. "They're gone," she whispered. "But thanks to you, they have a real chance." His heart clenched, eyes wet. "Yeah," he managed. "I just hope everything goes well for them. That the paparazzi or anyone else never gets in their way." Felicia gave a gentle squeeze. "We can guard their secret until they're ready to reveal themselves. I'll destroy any remaining data that might endanger them, but keep a copy, hidden safely, so we can continue the research if they return." Ethan nodded, gratitude and loss warring inside him. He gazed at the empty space where the portal had been, the echo of Mira and Sylis's presence still lingering like a warm current. Months passed. The paparazzi scandal fizzled without the damning photos. They pestered Ethan a few more times, but lacking concrete evidence, their claims about alien visitors were dismissed as sensational fabrication. Arlo, ever the ghost in the machine, kept watch on digital channels, ensuring no new leaks surfaced. Life found its rhythm again. Ethan returned to his photography, though his art took on a subtle shift. He captured the city's nights with renewed wonder, each photograph tinged with a quiet reverence for the extraordinary that could be hidden in the ordinary. He often found his thoughts drifting to two radiant figures with cerulean skin, who had once shared his cramped apartment and taught him the weight of empathy. Felicia kept in touch, occasionally hinting at new research inspired by the Orvarian project. She teased Ethan that his genes might hold further surprises, though neither dared delve deeper without Mira and Sylis to guide them. And then, one cold winter night, Ethan awoke to a faint hum. A shimmering light danced in his living room, near the spot where the shower curtain had once been dramatically pulled aside. Heart pounding, he rushed from his bedroom, barely daring to hope. A swirling radiance coalesced, forming a phase shift portal. Two silhouettes emerged, Mira and Sylis, their eyes brimming with joy, their skin glowing with vibrant health. In Mira's arms, she cradled a small bundle, swathed in translucent fabric that shimmered with a gentle luminescence. A baby, blue-skinned with an otherworldly innocence in its wide, curious eyes. Sylis smiled, tears of happiness streaking down her cheeks. "Orvara is healing," she announced, voice trembling with emotion. The embryo became a child, a symbol of rebirth for our people. Many more will follow. Mira's gaze locked with Ethan's. We had to come to show you. And to thank you. Overcome, Ethan dropped to his knees, tears flooding his eyes as he carefully touched the tiny fingers of the child, who gripped his thumb with surprising strength. The cabin, Orvara, Earth, all seemed to converge in that moment, a testament to the unbreakable bond they had forged. In time, they would tell him of newly replenishing water sources on Orvara, of carefully engineered solutions that spread hope across the planet. They would share stories of how the child's birth reignited faith among the Orvarian populace. But for now, the simple presence of this precious life told him all he needed to know. And under the hush of a winter moon, in an apartment once haunted by loneliness, Ethan felt the warmth of two worlds joined in harmony. Mira and Sylis held him close, the baby cradled against them, as an unspoken promise unfurled in the quiet space. A future bright with possibility, where the waters of Earth and Orvara might one day flow together in peace. They stayed until dawn, whispering tales of the changes on Orvara, laughing and shedding tears in equal measure. And when the first rays of sunlight stretched across the horizon, they slipped back into the shimmering portal, promising to return soon, to continue healing, not only their planet but the bonds that now linked their hearts. Left with a tangible glow of hope in his chest, Ethan gazed at the spot where they had disappeared, a smile breaking through the lingering tears. A new day beckoned, a new chapter beginning. For he knew that somewhere far away, across a cosmic sea, Mira and Sylis carried a piece of Earth with them, a testament that life, in all its infinite wonders, could conquer despair and bridge unimaginable distances. And so the story ended not in tears or regret, but in a promise of unity, reminding all who heard of it that compassion, courage, and love are the true constants in this vast universe. And that sometimes, all it takes to save a dying world is a spark of hope shared between two souls, even if they hail from different stars.